Chapter 18. The 12 years that followed that bleak time, Mrs. Dean continued, were the happiest of my life. My greatest concerns during those years stemmed from our young lady's minor illnesses, which are common to all children, regardless of wealth. Beyond that, after the first 6 months, she thrived like a large tree. And before the heather bloomed again over Mrs. Linton's grave, she was already walking and talking in her own unique way. She was the most delightful presence to ever bring light into a lonely home, truly beautiful, with the Earnshaws' striking dark eyes, the Lintons' fair complexion and delicate features, and golden curls. Her spirit was high, yet not harsh, tempered by a heart that was exceedingly sensitive and lively in its affections. This capacity for deep attachments reminded me of her mother, though she was not quite like her. She could be as gentle and soft as a dove, with a tender voice and a thoughtful expression. Her anger was never wild. Her love was never intense. It was profound and tender. Nonetheless, she had flaws that countered her gifts. She had a tendency to be cheeky, and a stubborn will that indulged children often develop, whether they are good-natured or irritable. If a servant happened to upset her, her immediate response was always, "I shall tell Papa." If he ever corrected her, even with just a glance, it seemed like a devastating affair. I doubt he ever uttered a harsh word to her. He took full charge of her education, turning it into a delightful pursuit. Luckily, her natural curiosity and sharp mind made her an eager student. She learned quickly and with enthusiasm, bringing pride to his teaching. Until she turned 13, she had never ventured beyond the park's boundaries on her own. Mr. Linton occasionally took her a mile or so outside, but he entrusted her to no one else. Gimmerton was just a vague name to her. The chapel was the only building she had visited apart from her home. Wuthering Heights and Mr. Heathcliff were non-existent in her world. She lived in complete seclusion and seemed entirely content with it. Sometimes, while gazing out at the landscape from her nursery window, she would ponder, "Ellen, how long until I can walk to the top of those hills? I wonder what's on the other side. Is it the sea?" "No, Miss Cathy," I would reply. "It's more hills, just like these." "And what are those golden rocks like when you're standing beneath them?" she once inquired. The sudden drop of Penistone Crags caught her eye, especially when the setting sun bathed the peaks in light, while the rest of the landscape lay in shadow. I explained that they were stark stone formations, with barely enough soil in their crevices to support a scraggly tree. "Why do they stay bright so long after it's evening here?" she asked. "Because they're much higher up than we are," I replied. "You couldn't climb them. They're too high and steep. In winter, frost settles there before it reaches us. And even deep into summer, I've found snow tucked away in that dark hollow on the northeast side." "Oh, you've been up there," she exclaimed with delight. "Then I can go too, when I'm grown. Has Papa been there, Ellen?" "Papa would tell you," I quickly answered, "that they're not worth the effort to visit. The moors, where you wander with him, are much nicer, and Thrushcross Park is the finest place in the world. But I know the park, and I don't know those," she murmured to herself. "And I would love to look around from the top of that tallest point. My little pony Minnie will take me there some day." One of the maids mentioned the fairy cave, sparking an intense desire in her to see it for herself. She pestered Mr. Linton about it, and he assured her she could make the trip when she was older. But Miss Catherine counted her age in months, constantly asking, "Am I old enough now to go to Penistone Crags?" The path to the crags passed close by Wuthering Heights, and Edgar couldn't bear to take it. So she was always met with the same response, "Not yet, love. Now, not yet." I mentioned that Mrs. Heathcliff lived over a dozen years after leaving her husband. Her family was of a fragile constitution. Both she and Edgar lacked the robust health common in these parts. I'm uncertain about the nature of her final illness, but I suspect they succumbed to the same ailment, a kind of fever, slow to start but ultimately incurable, swiftly draining life at the end. She wrote to her brother, informing him of the likely outcome of a 4-month illness she had endured, pleading for him to visit if he could. She had much to settle and wished to say goodbye, hoping to entrust Linton to his care. She convinced herself that his father had no interest in taking on the responsibility of his upbringing or education. My master didn't hesitate for a moment to fulfill her request, though he was usually reluctant to leave home for ordinary matters. He rushed to her side, entrusting Catherine to my careful watch in his absence. He repeatedly instructed that she must not leave the park, even with my supervision, not anticipating she would venture out alone. He was gone for 3 weeks. In the first couple of days, my young charge sat quietly in a corner of the library, too despondent to read or play. In this subdued state, she was no trouble at all, but soon this gave way to a restless, irritable boredom. Being both too busy and too old to entertain her by running around, I devised a way for her to amuse herself. I began sending her on little adventures around the grounds, sometimes on foot, sometimes on a pony, indulging her with a patient ear for all her real and imagined exploits when she returned. The summer was in full bloom, and she developed as a sort of fondness for these solitary excursions that she often managed to stay ordered from breakfast until tea time. The evenings were then filled with her recounting her whimsical tales. I wasn't worried about her wandering too far, as the gates were usually locked, and I doubted she would venture out alone, even if they were wide opened. Unfortunately, my trust was misplaced. One morning at 8, Catherine came to me, declaring she was an Arabian merchant about to cross the desert with her caravan. She insisted I provide ample provisions for herself and her animals, a horse and 3 camels, played by a large hound and 2 pointers. I packed a generous supplies of treats, hanging them in a basket on one side of the saddle. She mounted, with the lightness of a fairy, protected from the July sun by her wide-brimmed hat and gauze veil, and trotted off with a merry laugh, dismissing my cautious advice to avoid galloping and return early. The mischievous girl did not show up for tea. One traveller, the hound being old and fond of comfort, returned. But neither Cathy, the pony, nor the 2 pointers were anywhere to be seen. I sent searchers down various paths and eventually went looking for her myself. A labourer was busy mending a fence along the edge of a plantation. I asked him if he had seen our young lady. "I saw her this morning," he said. "She asked me to cut her a hazel switch. Then she jumped her galloway over the hedge where it's lowest and rode off." You can imagine my reaction to this news. It immediately occurred to me that she must have headed for Penistone Crags. What will happen to her? I exclaimed, squeezing through a gap the man was fixing and making my way directly to the main road. I walked with urgency, mile after mile, until a bend in the road revealed the heights. But I saw no sign of Catherine, near or far. The crags are about 1.5 miles past Mr. Heathcliff's estate, which itself is 4 miles from the Grange, so I began to worry that night would fall before I reached them. And what if she slipped while climbing and got hurt, or worse? I thought, my anxiety mounting. Initially, I felt a strange relief when rushing past the farmhouse. I noticed Charlie, the most aggressive of the pointers, lying under a window with a swollen head and a bleeding ear. I opened the gate and ran to the door, knocking urgently. A woman I recognized, who had once lived in Gimmerton and had been walking there since Mr. Earnshaw's death, answered. "Ah," she said, "you've come looking for your little mistress. Don't worry. She's safe here, but I'm relieved it's not the master." "He's not home, is he?" I asked, breathless from my hurried walk and the anxiety that had gripped me. "No, no, she replied. "Both he and Joseph are out, and I doubt they'll be back for at least an hour. Come in and rest a while." I stepped inside and saw my little runaway, seated by the hearth, rocking herself in a small chair that had belonged to her mother as a child. Her hat hung on the wall, and she seemed completely at ease, laughing and chatting with Hareton, a robust young man of 18, who watched her with a mix of curiosity and surprise, understanding very little of the rapid stream of words and questions she was joyfully unleashing. "Well, miss," I declared, masking my relief with a stern expression, "this is your last outing until your father returns. I won't let you cross the threshold again, you naughty, naughty girl." "Aha, Ellen," she exclaimed cheerfully, jumping up and running to my side. "I've got quite a tale to tell tonight. So, you found me out. Have you ever been here before in your life?" "Put that hat on and head home immediately," I insisted. "I'm deeply upset with you, Miss Cathy. You've acted very wrongly. Pouting and crying won't make up for the trouble I've gone through, searching everywhere for you. Just think how Mr. Linton instructed me to keep you inside, and yet you sneaked away. It proves you're a sly little fox, and no one will trust you any more." "What have I done?" she sobbed, suddenly halted. "Papa didn't give me any orders. He won't scold me, Ellen. He's never cross like you." "Come now," I repeated. "I'll tie the ribbon. Let's have no more sulking. Oh, for shame. You're 13 years old and behaving like such a child." This outburst came as she pushed the hat off her head and backed away to the chimney out of my reach. Now, said the servant, "don't be too harsh on the sweet girl, Mrs. Dean. We made her stay. She would have ridden on, worried you might be anxious." Hareton offered to accompany her, and I thought it wise he should. The path over the hills is treacherous. Throughout the conversation, Hareton stood there with his hands shoved into his pockets, too awkward to speak, though it was clear he wasn't pleased with my presence. "How long am I supposed to wait?" I pressed on, ignoring the woman's attempts to intervene. "It'll be dark in 10 minutes. Where's the pony, Miss Cathy? And where's Phoenix? I'll leave you behind if you don't hurry. So make your choice. The pony's in the yard, she answered. And Phoenix is locked up there. He's been bitten. And so has Charlie. I was going to explain it all to you, but you're in such a foul mood. You don't deserve to hear. I picked up her hat and moved to put it back on her, but seeing that the household sided with her, she began darting around the room. And as I chased her, she scampered like a mouse over, under, and behind the furniture, making it absurd for me to continue. Hareton and the woman laughed, and she joined in, growing even more insolent, until I shouted in frustration, "Well, Miss Cathy, if you knew whose house this is, you'd be eager enough to leave." "It's your father's, isn't it?" she said, turning to Hareton. "No," he replied, looking down and blushing shyly. He couldn't bear to meet her eyes for long, even though they mirrored his own. "Then whose eyes are they? Your master's," she pressed. His face flushed a deeper shade, this time with a different emotion. He cursed under his breath and turned away. "Who is his master?" the persistent girl asked me. He mentioned a house and eager people. I thought he was the owner's son, and he never said miss. Shouldn't he, if he's a servant? Hareton's expression darkened like a brewing storm at her naive remarks. I quietly urged her to leave, finally managing to prepare her for departure. "Now, fetch my horse," she instructed her unknown relative, speaking to him as if he were one of the stable boys at the Grange. "And you can come with me. I want to see where the goblin hunter rises in the marsh and hear about the fairishes, as you call them." "But hurry up. What's the hold-up?" I said. "Get my horse." "I'll see you damned before I become your servant," the young man retorted. "You'll see me what?" Catherine asked, taken aback. "Damn you, you insolent witch," he retorted. "There, Miss Cathy. See the kind of company you found yourself in," I interjected. "Such language for a young lady! Please don't start arguing with him. Let's go find Minnie ourselves and leave." "But Ellen," she exclaimed, wide-eyed with disbelief. "How dare he speak to me like that? Shouldn't he be made to do what I ask? You vile creature, I'll tell father what you said." "Now then." Hareton seemed unfazed by her threat, which only made her eyes well up with indignant tears. "Bring the pony," she demanded, turning to the woman, "and let my dog go this instant." "Easy now, miss," the woman replied. "Being polite won't cost you anything. Even if Mr. Hareton isn't the master's son, he's still your cousin, and I wasn't hired to serve you." "He, my cousin?" Cathy scoffed with a derisive laugh. "Yes, indeed," her admonisher confirmed. "Oh, Ellen, don't let them say such things," she implored, visibly distressed. "Papa has gone to London to bring back my cousin, who is the son of a gentleman." The mere thought of being related to such a bourgeois made her stop and cry openly. "Hush, hush," I whispered. "People can have all sorts of cousins, Miss Cathy, without it reflecting poorly on them. You don't have to associate with them if they're unpleasant or troublesome." He's not my cousin Ellen," she insisted, her sorrow intensifying with the thought. And she threw herself into my arms to escape the idea. I was quite annoyed with her and the servant for their indiscreet revelations. I was certain that Linton's imminent arrival as disclosed by the servant, would be reported to Mr. Heathcliff. I also felt sure that Catherine's first impulse upon her father's return would be to demand an explanation about her supposedly uncouth relatives. Hareton, recovering from the insult of being mistaken for a servant, seemed touched by her distress. To appease her, he brought a fine crooked-legged terrier puppy from the kennel, placed it in her hands, and urged her to hush, meaning no harm. She paused in her lamentations, looked at him with a mix of awe and horror, then burst into tears again. I could hardly suppress a smile at her aversion to the poor fellow, who was a well-built, athletic young man, handsome and robust, though dressed in clothes suited to his work on the farm and his leisure time on the moors, hunting rabbits and game. Yet I thought I could see in his face a mind with better qualities than his father ever had. Amidst a tangle of weeds, there were indeed good things lost, overgrown and neglected, yet hinting at the richness of the soil beneath, which could flourish under more favourable conditions. Mr. Heathcliff, it seems, hadn't physically mistreated him. His fearless nature didn't invite such oppression. He lacked the timid vulnerability that might have made cruelty more appealing to Heathcliff. Instead, Heathcliff seemed intent on reducing him to a brute. He was never taught to read or write, never scolded for any bad habits, unless they bothered his keeper, never guided towards virtue, nor shielded from vice. From what I gathered, Joseph played a significant role in his decline, driven by a narrow-minded favoritism that led him to coddle and spoil him as a boy simply because he was the heir of the old family, just as he had once accused Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff of driving their father to drink with their so-called wicked ways. He now blamed all of Hareton's faults on the usurper of his inheritance. If the boy swore or misbehaved, Joseph wouldn't correct him. It seemed to please Joseph to see him at his worst. He acknowledged that the boy was ruined, that his soul was lost. But he took comfort in the belief that Heathcliff would have to answer for it. Hareton's blood would be on Heathcliff's hands, and Joseph found immense solace in that thought. Joseph had instilled in him a pride in his name and lineage. He would have encouraged hatred between him and the current owner of the Heights if he dared. But his fear of that owner was almost superstitious, so he kept his feelings to whispered insinuations and private curses. I can't claim to know firsthand the lifestyle that was typical at Wuthering Heights during those times. My understanding comes from what I've heard, as I witnessed very little myself. The villagers said Mr. Heathcliff was miserly and a harsh landlord to his tenants. Yet, under the management of the women in the house, it had regained its former comfort, and the wild scenes that were common during Hindley's era no longer occurred. The master remained too brooding to seek out any company, whether good or bad, and he still does. But I digress from my tale. Miss Cathy refused the peace offering of the terrier and insisted on having her own dogs, Charlie and Phoenix. They approached, limping and with heads lowered, and we set off for home, all of us in a rather sour mood. I couldn't coax from my young lady how she had spent her day, except that, as I guessed, her destination was Penistone Crags. She had reached the farmhouse gate without incident when Hareton emerged, accompanied by some dogs that attacked her entourage. A lively skirmish ensued before the owners could separate them, which served as their introduction. Catherine told Hareton who she was and where she was headed, and asked him to guide her eventually persuading him to join her. He revealed the secrets of the fairy cave and 20 other curious spots. However, since I was out of favor, I wasn't granted a description of the intriguing sights she encountered. I gathered that her guide had once been a favorite, until she wounded his pride by addressing him as a servant. Heathcliff's housekeeper further aggravated her by calling him her cousin. The words he used against her lingered painfully in her heart. She, who was always love, darling, queen, and angel to everyone at the Grange, was insulted so harshly by a stranger. She couldn't fathom it, and it took considerable effort to secure her promise not to bring the grievance to her father. I explained how he disapproved of everyone at the Heights and how upset he'd be to learn she had visited there. But I emphasized most that if she exposed my failure to follow his orders, he might be so furious that I'd have to leave. And Cathy couldn't bear that thought. She gave her word and kept it for my sake. After all, she was a sweet little girl.